Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Bodhi Tree Buddhism. This week we are on class 4 of our third course, Mindfulness Meditation. So welcome along. To those of you who are new, it's good to see you and very happy that you've managed to find the Bodhi Tree Buddhist Community site here on Facebook and you've decided to join us. And to those of you who have been with us for quite some time, of course, it's wonderful to see you back and glad you can join us again for another class. If you're getting the live stream, please feel free, well, not just feel free, but please drop a message in the little comments box that comes with the video. It's really great and really helpful to see who's tuning into the live stream. So as I said, this week we are on week 4. We've got 6 weeks in total for this course on mindfulness meditation. And this week is week 4, and our focus for this week is mindfulness of sensations or mindfulness of feelings. And we'll talk a little bit about that particular term and what it means in just a few minutes. But just a little reminder of the whole sort of context and how this week's class fits within our whole 6 weeks course. Just a reminder that mindfulness, according to the particular sutras and texts that we are looking at for this course, so there are 4 foundations of mindfulness or 4 grounds of mindfulness. Okay, I see Nathaniel's left a little good morning there. I'm not sure if it's morning where you are, Nathaniel, but thanks for dropping in. I'm guessing probably somewhere in the evening where you are, so I hope you're safe and sound wherever you may be, and thanks for tuning in. So we've got 4 grounds of mindfulness, okay? You remember what these are? So the first one is mindfulness of the body. The second one is mindfulness of feelings or sensations, so that's what we're doing this week. And then the third one is mindfulness of mental states, and the last one is mindfulness of dharmas, okay? Now you might be thinking, particularly if you're just tuning in, it's your first time watching these classes here, you might think, just a second, if this is already the 4th week, why now are we only up to the 2nd ground of mindfulness? And those of you, of course, that have been with us for a while will know that we've given quite a bit of attention to the first one, mindfulness of the body, because I think that's our real strong foundation for all these types of mindfulness that we are looking at here. In particular, mindfulness of the breath, right? Mindfulness of the breath. Now, breathing as a kind of a function of the body is traditionally associated with part of mindfulness of the body. So that's the first ground or the first foundation or establishment of mindfulness. But the way that we're looking at it here, we're also following not just the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, so not just the teaching on the great teaching on the foundations of mindfulness, but also in particular the teaching on mindfulness of the breath, ānāpāna, so breathing in and breathing out. And in that particular text, we saw how while we're still using the 4 grounds, the 4 foundations from the body, feelings, mental states, and then dharmas, but as a way to kind of connect through all of these and kind of a really important thread of practice that we use throughout all 4 of them, we're using the breath. So we're going to, of course, continue with that today. Our breath is going to be our foundation. It's a really important cornerstone of this whole practice. And so we spent a couple of weeks at the start talking about the body getting just mindfulness of the body, but also in particular working on mindfulness of the breath. And there are some other reasons also why I think mindfulness of the breath and breath meditation in general is a really, really powerful practice. I see a lot of different Buddhist, well, and not just Buddhist, also Buddhist and Hindu forms of meditation, which have now been introduced into countries outside of Asia. I'm not going to say the West. I mean, for myself, for example, I mean, I started I started my own training as a Buddhist monk in South Africa. I mean, is South Africa the West? It's debatable. But what I mean is the new influx of meditation teachings outside of those Asian countries which were traditionally Buddhist. And so, okay, Anne Meifang, good to see you there. I'm happy that you've joined us this morning. And within all these different types of practice, you know, there are so many different forms of meditation, even within Buddhist traditions, let alone if we add, say, various forms of Hindu meditation, or we add Taoist meditation, and other, you know, combinations or other similar forms. But when it comes to all these different techniques, the ease of access for people to whom these practices is very new can vary a lot. And one of the nice things about the breath is kind of, I think the way people perceive it is it's not perceived as so much a religious practice. I mean, for example, a lot of people practicing various forms of qigong, right? It's just working with the breath, what we might call breath work. And it doesn't necessarily entail people having a certain type of belief in any system of or hierarchy of spiritual beings, be they Buddhas or Bodhisattvas or gods or other forms of deity. I mean, if you just tell someone, even someone who's a hard materialist or atheist, you know, that paying attention to your breath, and you can use your breath in order to calm down your body and calm down your mental states, they'll often find it quite acceptable. So this is another reason why I've wanted to give in the last couple of classes a bit more attention to the breath. Okay, so today we're going to be continuing with the breath, and I'll just do kind of a little bit of a basic reminder of the practices that we've been doing building up until today, and then we're going to turn and have a look at what the sutras that we've been looking at, so in particular the greater teaching on mindfulness, on the foundations of mindfulness, so Mahasatipatthana Sutta, and also the teaching on mindfulness of breathing in and breathing out, inhalation and exhalation. So that's the ānāpāna Sati Sutta, about what they say up until this point, just a little refresher, and I think it's always really useful to do that kind of refresher. And then we're going to look into the material specifically about what they say about mindfulness of feelings or sensations. And when we get to that point, we're going to see that it seems from what I've studied and also what I've learned from different teachers, that there are two quite the interpretations and the ways to practice this. There are kind of two distinct approaches here. They're still got a lot of overlapping point, but it seems to me that there are kind of two distinct approaches here, and I'd like to talk about both of those today. I don't want to just be exclusive and just give you one kind of take on what it means to be mindful of sensations or mindful of these feelings. Before I continue though, maybe just first talk a little bit about this term feelings or sensations. So up until this point, and I think even like the little kind of blurb that I put for today's class when I put out the notification yesterday and also in today's class, I think sometimes I use sensation, sometimes I use feeling, and sometimes I use a bit of both. So I'd just like to kind of clarify that first, and then maybe I can just stick to one term. So in Pāli, this term is sanya. In Sanskrit, it's samjñā. In Chinese, it's xiang. And so what does this mean? Well, okay, we're going to have to talk about like the whole place of this within Buddhist thought and particularly Buddhist psychology. Long story short, it's usually oh, sorry, my mistake, I'm giving you totally the wrong term. The term is Vedana, so my apologies. Backtrack, just delete what I just said a minute ago. The term is Vedana. Vedana in Pāli and Sanskrit, it's the same term. And in Chinese, the term is shou. Now, this term Vedana is within the, it's the second of the 5 aggregates in Buddhist thought. So maybe you've heard of these 5 aggregates. So the first one's like the physical body. The second one is then this feelings or sensations. Then we have perceptions. Then we have complexes or volitions. And finally we have consciousness or cognition. So the second one, now usually, so that the one that we're talking about today, so mindfulness of sensation or mindfulness of feeling, Vedana, is most of the time in English translated as feelings. Feelings. The basic definition of feelings is that when our senses, when we have some kind of sensory interaction with the world, say for example, with our eyes we might see something, and then we have this cognition of whatever it is that we see. So like for example, now your eyes are open and you're seeing something, but let's imagine something. I don't want to implant thoughts in your head, but imagine you're seeing a delicious donut. Okay, so you see a donut, and you might, you don't just see it, but you're also going to have some kind of like response to it. And in general, these kinds of responses are of 3 types. We consider it pleasant, we consider it unpleasant or painful. So pleasant, unpleasant / painful, or technically they call it neither pleasant nor unpleasant. But I think we can kind of just basically call that neutral. So pleasant, painful, or neutral kind of a response to it. Now, I think it was a long time ago that in English they started to translate this word as feelings. And it's, I mean, a few weeks ago we talked even about the very word mindfulness itself. It was a long time ago, I think it was like 19th century, that they started to translate this term sati or smrti or nian in Chinese as mindfulness. And that's a term in English which is kind of stuck. And I think a lot of people think, like, yeah, it's a really, I think it was probably even like a neologism at the time, kind of a newly created word. It wasn't like even a real word. They coined it and it stuck and it seems to work, and it's now, mindful or mindfulness has become just a really common like English language word in context totally nothing to do with Buddhism. And I think it was probably around the same time that they started to use this term feelings. But there's a couple of reasons why I personally don't think the word feelings is the best. And one of them is, let's just think about how we use the term feelings in English in general. And this is a kind of a common problem with a lot of English language Buddhist terminology, is we sometimes, the people that use this terminology and translators, sometimes it's hard to kind of think, like, how does this word actually just work in regular, ordinary English? So if we think about feelings, we might think of something like, we might say, I hurt your feelings, or we might say something like, what are your feelings about this? And so in that way, feelings, I think, in really kind of common English language usage in the early 20th century, kind of means something really similar to emotions. And it includes a big range of things. If you say like, I have mixed feelings about it, or you say, I have feelings for someone, that can include like a huge range of different like emotions. And I just want to say really clearly, the term that we're talking about here in the Buddhist context isn't talking about a range of emotions at all. It's just talking about pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Like a feeling of having, I don't know, sincerity, a feeling of anger, a feeling of love. None of these, okay, I want to be really clear, none of these terms like anger, jealousy, love, sentiment, none of these are included in this category of Vedana, right? So this is one of the reasons why I don't like to call it feelings, and I think it's better to term it something like sensations. I have a pleasant sensation, or I have an unpleasant sensation, or I have a neutral sensation. And I think we can use the term feelings in a much broader sense to include, I think it can probably include pleasant, painful, and neutral, but it can also include the whole huge range of different emotions, be they wholesome emotions and unwholesome emotions. Okay. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but I just first of all wanted to clarify that term, because for many of you, you might be very used to hearing this term Vedana translated as feelings, mindfulness of feelings. In a moment, we're going to see in the text it uses mindfulness of feelings, and I just want to give my little take on it. I hope that's okay. Give you a new take. Sometimes I think it's good to think a bit more about the words that we use. I think I probably overdo it. My apologies. I overdo it because I do a lot of translation work, and I spend a lot of time thinking about what is the best term to kind of translate this concept. Okay, I see Mika has joined us online. Good morning there, Mika. Hope you're doing well today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm happy to see you back with us again for another week. Okay, so where were we? We were talking about sensations. Okay, so I'm gonna try to stick with this term sensations for the rest of today's class. I might not be consistent. Okay, I'll ask for forgiveness beforehand. Okay, so that's this kind of idea then, right? Just basically sensations through our different senses, right? Which includes the things that we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and also things that we think of, like so the internal sense, that's called the sixth sense, the mental sense. When we see things, hear things, smell, etc., different things, different objects of our sensory world, including internally in the mind, we'll almost always have some kind of sensation as a response. That comes from outside. So it might be, in really broad terms, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Okay, so that's just a really kind of basic definition to kind of keep in mind. Now let's maybe for now jump into the text and see just how the text has it. And then we can start to see what are the real basics of just being mindful of these sensations. Okay, I'm going to try to click over. Hope this goes smoothly now. Okay, here we go. So this is in our first text that we've been looking at, the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. So the greater teaching on mindfulness, greater teaching on the foundations of mindfulness, or the establishment of mindfulness. And it's got a description here. Now, I'm just going to show you, even before I start reading, just how short this passage is here. Okay, you see that? There's one little paragraph. Continues on. That's the rest of the paragraph. Still the same paragraph. And then we've got this this so-called insight, which is a stock passage. We've already seen the stock passage earlier for mindfulness of the body, in the ways in which we contemplate it. Okay, so it's pretty short. So we'll read through this first, and then I want to talk in even more detail about some of the implications of this and how to do it. And also, very important question, why? Why is it so important to be mindful of these sensations? Okay, so let's read. I hope you're with me still. And how practitioners does a practitioner abide contemplating sensations as sensations? Okay, so just to repeat, this is the Buddha. He kind of asks himself a question and then he gives the answer. So, and how practitioners does a practitioner or a meditator abide contemplating sensations as sensations? Okay. Just another note, I think I haven't mentioned this earlier. This term abide is actually in many Buddhist texts a synonym for meditate. So it'll be something like viharati, literally to abide or to dwell or to stay, but it is very commonly used to refer to meditate. So how do we meditate with this contemplation of sensation as sensation? Here, so continuing, here, when sensing a pleasant sensation, a practitioner understands, I sense a pleasant sensation. When sensing a painful sensation, they understand, I sense a painful sensation. And when feeling a neither painful nor pleasant sensation, so we could say like a neutral sensation, they understand I sense a neutral sensation. Okay, so far so good. So just these three basic ones, right? So when you know that it's pleasant, when something is pleasant, you know, right now I'm sensing, or I'm even experiencing a pleasant sensation. When it's painful, you know, I am sensing or experiencing a painful sensation, and likewise for a neutral sensation. Okay. Oh, just a little note. Now I've just dropped in that last sentence or two another term. I've used the term experience. Now, usually in Buddhism, when we're talking about this idea of Vedana, so sensation, it's often in the context of the 5 aggregates that I've just talked about, or these 4 foundations of mindfulness. It can also be used, in that case it's a noun, when it's used as a verb, a really appropriate way to translate it is experience. Just to experience something, and then it's kind of got a broader sense, but I think it's still appropriate. And if we think about it like that, right? I am experiencing a painful sensation. I'm experiencing a pleasant sensation, or I'm experiencing a neutral sensation. These 3 basic categories, very simple. It continues though, there's a bit more detail. When feeling a worldly pleasant feeling, or worldly pleasant sensation, they understand I feel or I experience a worldly pleasant sensation. And likewise for when experiencing an unworldly pleasant sensation, they understand I'm feeling an unworldly pleasant sensation. And when feeling or experiencing a worldly painful sensation, they understand I feel a worldly painful sensation. And likewise for experiencing an unworldly painful sensation. All right, so we've got these different categories. Okay, first we had just really simple: pleasant, painful, and neutral. Now we've kind of got a bit more detailed analysis where we break it down. You've still got these same basics: pleasant, painful, and neutral, but we've got 2 categories. We've got unworldly and we've got worldly. Now it's a bit of a question. So what does it mean by worldly and what does it mean by unworldly? Okay. And that's it, basically. You can see, following the same pattern, we've finished off this paragraph here. Okay. Now, with the second category, I think the first category is like fairly straightforward, right? So it's pleasant, unpleasant, or painful, and neutral. It's pretty straightforward. The second part, when we add this extra element of worldly or unworldly, kind of like, okay, what does this mean? Because that's not a, you know, we know the word in English, worldly, unworldly. Okay, I can understand the word, but the question is, what does it mean? I think we get this a lot with Buddhist material. If we're fairly new to it, we look at the words, we know the words. If somebody says, what does it mean? We're like, don't worry, okay, don't panic. This isn't just a problem with like translation. It really is a matter of getting our heads into a kind of a really Buddhist, Dharma-oriented way of looking at the world. And this also happens in Chinese. I think actually probably people reading Chinese texts, I mean even native speakers of the Chinese language, it's the same. Show them some Buddhist documents. Yeah, they can read every word, know every word, know what every word means by itself, put it together in a sentence, in a paragraph, and it's like, not so clear. So we've got 2 categories. We've got this idea of worldly and we've got this idea of unworldly. And sometimes, again, these terms, I sometimes like to translate them as mundane. And then rather than not mundane, it might be something more like transmundane. Okay, so mundane is just kind of also a bit of a fancy way of saying worldly, right? Of the world. Something that's mundane is something that's of the world. Of course, in English, it can just mean like ordinary. And that's probably about right too. You know, ordinary things are just kind of the ordinary experiences that we have. So when we're talking about these worldly feelings, we are talking about just these ordinary everyday experiences that we have in the world, in our usual lives. So when we're eating food, when we are watching TV, when we're reading a book, when we're playing sports, playing music or listening to music, we're always getting different sensations. Eating food, tasty food might be pleasant. Maybe you left a banana on the shelf too long, it starts to smell bad or unpleasant smell. Listen to music, sounds good. Listen to some horrible music you don't like, oh, it sounds terrible. These are all mundane things. They're all things of the world. And of course, in Buddhism, of the world also means and has the sense of being samsaric. Okay, being samsaric. So you all know this term samsara, right? Samsara, and literally means this is like a whirlpool or like a flood. It's like a stream, often used in the metaphor of the ocean, but it's actually more like a stream. And I think probably when this term came out, it's a flooding river. It's dangerous. It's going to suck us down. We're going to drown in it. And it's also the idea of like a cyclic existence, right? Birth, growing up, growing old, and dying, and being reborn again. This is also very common sense of the Buddhist term mundane or worldly. Okay, so worldly experience. Okay, I'm just noticing a little comment there from Marie. I never knew that about abide. Okay, sure. And just for your own information there, Marie Law, the Chinese term for that is 住, as in like, you know, 你住在哪里的住. So usually means, you know, like abide or dwell. Where do you live? Where do you dwell? But often in this sense, meditate. So where was I? Okay, we're talking about, so worldly things are samsaric things. And, you know, if we do just engage in the world in terms of like 喝吃玩乐 in Chinese, so eat, drink and be merry would be the Chinese, right? Eat, drink and be merry. That is the life, the mundane life that just leads to samsaric existence. So in that case, what do we mean then by unworldly or transmundane? So beyond the worldly, beyond the mundane. Well, this is what's referred to, what this refers to is in our Buddhist practice. Our Buddhist practice. So when we're engaging in meditation, for example, we are hopefully we're engaging in this practice which is at least going in the direction of liberation. It's going against this flow, going against this tide, and is slowly but surely working your way out of the samsaric existence to find liberation, right? To find the other shore. So what can that include then? Well, in the course of our spiritual practice, we're also undertaking and engaging in other things as well. So meditation is one of them. It might also include upholding the precepts. And just you know, keep in mind that these texts were probably originally directed more at monastics. And in the early days of the Buddhist community, a lot of them did practice some pretty, you know, what the Buddhists considered kind of fairly standard, old school monastic discipline. While it wasn't the self-mortification, you know, like the lying on beds of nails and, you know, raising up your arm until, you know, the blood circulation stops and your arm like goes numb and starts to literally die, that some of the non-Buddhist schools did. But even the lifestyle of the monastic, you know, you don't live indoors, you live outdoors, and not just during the day. You sleep under a tree, but you don't even lie down. You remain seated. You take one meal a day from food that you've begged. You have only 3 robes and no more to cover your body. This pretty hard lifestyle, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough life, you know. We might think of kind of the classic example in the ancient Buddhist community is, of course, the Buddha's disciple Mahakasyapa, who was a very famous ascetic practitioner. And that kind of lifestyle, yeah, there's going to be painful experiences in that process. You know, just suffering the weather, the cold in the winter, the heat in the summer, the fact that you might not always get food in your begging bowl and you might have to go hungry, the fact that you're out there all day meditating and your legs get sore and your back gets sore. You know, these things are going to happen. These experiences, because they are undertaken in the course of your spiritual practice, are what is being referred to here as these unworldly, pleasant, painful, and neutral sensations. Okay. Now, the way I've then explained kind of the worldly, so the worldly is just the things that we're doing in our normal life that aren't really helping us on our path. The unworldly are the things that are leading to liberation, lead us out of the path. But I've given that in a fairly broad sense. There are some other explanations in different traditions where they talk about the unworldly, the liberating path, and they talk about it specifically as sort of higher forms of experience. So the kinds of experience within deep meditation, the types of experiences when one generates really deep wisdom that leads to various stages of liberation. And I think that should definitely be included in there. But I think it's worth noting, because the fact that even for the unworldly types of sensations and feelings, it also includes painful ones. So normally those types of insight and attaining, you know, often they talk about like nirvana itself as like the highest bliss or the highest happiness. None of those forms of attainment are described as being painful. So the very fact that the text talks about unworldly but painful experiences, I think, can include then other forms of discomfort or worse that are experienced throughout this process of the spiritual path. Okay, but whichever the case, be it worldly or unworldly, they really still just come back to these three categories, right? Pleasant, painful, and this kind of neither nor. I'm just going to call it neutral. It's worth pointing out that the kind of the neutral is, in Buddhist terms, considered to be a type of sensation. It's not because it's like, it's neither pleasant nor painful, therefore there's no sensation. No. The Buddhist take is always, it definitely is a sensation, but it's a neutral sensation. Okay, let's just jump a little bit ahead. We've still got just one little paragraph further in this text. And we've seen this formula before, and we're going to see it again. This thing, in Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, he has this little subheading called insight, and it follows a stock pattern that's repeated for each of the 4 grounds of mindfulness. We saw it earlier for abiding, contemplating the body as the body, internally and externally. Remember that? We talked about different ways of internal and external. And we're going to see it later also for abiding, contemplating mental states as mental states, and for abiding, contemplating dharmas as dharmas. Okay, but let's just go through it again, because it is quite an important thing. This is really the insight part. You're not just saying, okay, pleasant feeling, painful feeling, neutral feeling. Not quite enough. That will give us our attention, that will give us our basis for mindfulness. But remember, on the path, we need insight. So let's have a look. In this way, the meditator abides contemplating sensations as sensations internally, or they abide contemplating sensations as sensations externally, or they abide contemplating sensations as sensations both internally and externally. Okay, now just a little reminder, if we think about the term internal or external, that's just a very literal translation. A couple of ways of interpreting that. One interpretation, internal means for yourself, external means for others. But then you might think, well, how can I like contemplate other people's sensations? Because I don't know. I mean, I I can imagine when somebody eats the tasty piece of pizza that they're having a pleasant feeling, but I don't actually know that, so how can I contemplate that? Yeah, it's a good question. But there's another one as well, whereas internally and externally refers to what is known as our internal senses and our external senses. So our external senses are eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. So the first 5 senses are things we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. And internal is the internal sense, the mind. So when you're seeing something pleasant or painful, whatever, or hearing or smelling, these are internally. This is contemplating feelings externally. When it's a thought in your mind, so you're lying there and you're daydreaming about something, oh, it would be wonderful if I, whatever it is you're thinking about, if I became a Buddha, yay! And I'll be so happy, and that will be very pleasant. Okay, now this comes from a mental state, right? I'm thinking about it, and it's thinking about this mental image or object that gives me the pleasant feeling. That is contemplating internally. Okay, so that's, again, 2 ways of interpreting this internal, external type of division of sensations or feelings. Furthermore, continuing with the text, or else he abides, or they abide, contemplating in sensations their nature of arising, or they abide contemplating in sensations their nature of vanishing, or they abide contemplating in sensation their nature of both arising and vanishing. So this is when we are then contemplating how this, say, pleasant or unpleasant or neutral feeling comes into existence. Okay, how does it come into existence? How does it cease? How does it come into existence and how it ceases? Now, this is like really important. Of course, it's totally related to the Buddhist idea of impermanence. That's basically what it is. We're seeing impermanence, and we are seeing particularly the impermanence of sensations. Okay. How do we do that? Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I'll get back to that one. For now, let's just say this is a contemplation on impermanence, and we need to know, so at first we don't have this particular sensation, and then, hey, we have it. So how did it go from not having this experience to having this experience? And then likewise, having had this experience, this particular sensation, I see something pleasant, or I hear something that sounds unpleasant. I hear the sound of, I don't know, some crunching, banging sound outside in the middle of the night, unpleasant, and then it stops. How? How did I first have a painful audio experience or sensation, and then it ceases to be? Rising and vanishing. Back to the text. Or else mindfulness that, and this quote, there is sensation, is simply established in them to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and mindfulness. Now this term here is bare knowledge. So this is kind of like ultimate basic bare blocks. And this particular idea that just simply there is sensation, or there is a feeling, just feeling, no further analysis, no, oh, is this internal, is that external, did it come through my visual stream, my auditory stream, my smells, my taste or touches or whatever. Forget all that, just sensation, or just pleasant sensation. Really simple, bare minimum recognition and knowledge and awareness and mindfulness of that is what is referred to here. Now this take in particular is what we see really strongly in a number of the vipassana, the insight meditation techniques that I guess it's over 100 years ago now, were first started in, I guess we can say, modern day Burma. It was Burma at the time, now of course it's Myanmar, and have had a really, really huge effect on a number of the Theravada traditions, in particular the vipassana. It just means mindfulness, it just means insight, right? We were talking about here insight. This whole section is insight. These insight meditation traditions, and of course these traditions are the ones that decades ago now were fairly early on brought into the West, combined with various forms of psychology and treatment and therapy. We talked all about this in like the first week of class, right? If you want more details and you haven't seen that first week of class, you can go back and learn a little bit about the kind of the modern history of mindfulness meditation. But that's the basics that they do. Now, I confess I haven't gone through one of these retreats. So this also includes like the Goenka tradition of Vipassana meditation, insight, mindfulness meditation. But I understand many of these traditions, the basic practice, so you'd be sitting there meditating and maybe you have some discomfort in your foot, unpleasant, you just go sensation. You just are aware of that sensation, and you at the same time you have that little thought sensation or pleasant sensation, painful sensation. Might not just be your foot, it might be something else, whatever it is. You have a sensation, you have the thought, this like little label or tag in your mind, sensation, as you are mindfully aware of that experience itself. Okay, so that's it. It's bare insight is often the way in which this is described. Bare insight. And you can kind of see there, like look in the text, right? Or else mindfulness, that there is feeling. It's got the little quote marks. That means that like the practitioner, the meditator, literally thinks that thought. There is feeling. Or you can make it even shorter, right? Just feeling or just sensation. 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 Be mindful of that. Be aware of that. That is kind of like the simplest way, the kind of bare minimum way. Bare minimum, not meaning like you know, when you get 51% in an exam, it's like you got a bare minimum pass. No, it doesn't mean it's like, it doesn't mean it's any less. It doesn't mean you have to have more detail for this practice to work or to be effective. Not meaning that at all. It's just like the simplest way. Sometimes the simplest ways for meditation are the most powerful and most effective. Okay, we'll just finish off this last little paragraph here. Whichever the case, whichever these forms of practice that we're using, last lines, last two sentences, and the meditator abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a meditator abides, contemplating sensations as sensations. Okay, so that's another important point here. You are meditating independent, not clinging to anything in the world. Freedom from attachment. Freedom from attachment. Bottom line practice, right? Okay. That is our text up until this point. Let me change the screen back here. How's that going there, everyone? Okay, so you've got some more people online. We've got Venerable's joined us here. Good to see you, Venerable. Thank you for tuning in. How are we doing for time today? Okay. We've got a little bit more time that I think I want to show you part of another text as well. I said earlier there's kind of like two different ways in which this practice is undertaken. Now what we've just seen from that last text, so from the actual Mahasatipatthana Sutta itself, we get the impression that it is just, okay, so we're meditating, and then when we have some kind of sensation, we are mindfully aware of that sensation. We are at the bare minimum just kind of labeling it as sensation, or feeling, whichever term you want to use. Or we could be slightly more specific. We might say pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation, neutral sensation. Again, the text says like, I am experiencing, right? Or I am feeling a such and such feeling. I think you can probably drop the I am and just go for like, just the label like sensation or pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation. Okay, I think it's simpler. That's one way of doing it. It's just, there you are. For whatever reason, you have some experience of some sensation. But let's have a look at another text, because in this other text, we're going to see a kind of it's a bit more of a narrow range, but I actually think it's probably what was originally meant for this. Okay, so here we are. I'm just going to play around with the document here. We're going to go into another text. We're going to go into mindfulness of breathing over here. Right, now do you remember from last week when we looked at the last 2 weeks, and we were talking about how mindfulness of breathing in a narrow sense is part of mindfulness of the body, but we can use mindfulness of breathing to actually fulfill all 4 grounds of mindfulness, right? We can use mindfulness of breathing not just for mindfulness of the body, but also for mindfulness of sensations, feelings, what we're doing today, mindfulness of mental phenomena, and also mindfulness of Dharma. So how do we do that? Now, the first one, so just a little reminder, here we go, mindfulness of breathing. Last week, you know, the meditator goes to the forest or the foot of a tree, they sit down, cross their legs, sit upright, establish mindfulness in front of them, and breathe in and out. Yeah, we did this last week. So basic, good meditation posture, be mindful of your breath. Then 2 types of breath, well, 4 types of breath. Breathing in a long breath, breathing in or out a long breath, breathing in or out a short breath, breathing in, experiencing the whole body, and breathing out, experiencing the whole body, and breathing in and out, tranquilizing or calming, relaxing the body, right? So we talked about these 4 last couple of weeks, and these 4 are using the breath to fulfill mindfulness of the body. Breathing, short breath, long breath, aware of the body, so breathing aware of the body. You don't just drop the breath and then focus on the body. You're using the breath and using the breath to be aware of the body, and then using the breath to relax the body. These first 4 are breath as mindfulness of the body. Next part, though, is another 4 ways then of using the breath to be mindful of sensations or feelings. So this is this section here, it's paragraph 19. Let's just read this. So the meditator trains thus, right? I shall breathe in, experiencing rapture. Now note these are little quote marks, so this is literally like the thought that the meditator has. And then I shall breathe out, experiencing rapture. We'll talk about this rapture. Rapture in particular, a lot of other religious connotations. We'll get to that in a minute. I shall breathe in, experiencing pleasure. I shall breathe out, experiencing pleasure. I shall breathe in, experiencing the mental formation, breathe out, experiencing the mental formation. I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the mental formation, and breathe in, tranquilizing the mental formation, and breathe out, tranquilizing the mental formation. Okay, now, so we've got rapture, pleasure, experiencing. Now, remember what I said earlier, like experiencing, I'm sorry, I should have checked the Pāli for you here. There's a good chance, I might be wrong though, there's a good chance that this term experiencing is just the verbal form of feeling or perception. Okay, it could be from Vedana, it could be from Anubhavati, might be something else, but very similar meaning, okay? So remember that, the very idea of experiencing something is similar to this idea of sensation. Rapture, pleasure, let's look at these first 2 first. Now, I know there might be a few of you out there that come from countries where various Christian traditions, particularly the more kind of evangelical Christian traditions, the idea of rapture, and for those of you that aren't familiar with this, in my limited knowledge, the rapture in Christian theology, not what it means here obviously, I just want to explain this. The idea of rapture in Christian theology is literally when Christ returns to the earth, so the second coming of Christ, and the true believers, the ones who will be saved, are literally lifted up into the heavens. And they return then to this kind of new kingdom of the Lord, and that's Christian rapture. Okay, does not mean that's here. This term here, rapture and pleasure, piti and sukha, are two terms that are used to describe the first stage of jhana or dhyana, meditative absorption. Right? So meditation, when you meditate and you focus, you first develop that mindfulness. As it deepens, you get to a state which is kind of entering like, it's a really qualitatively different state to our usual mundane state of mind, right? First of all, the mind is concentrated, it's focused. We don't have the five hindrances. Do you remember these? Five hindrances: sensual desire, aversion, dullness and sleepiness, mental agitation, and doubt with respect to the practice. We are freed from sensory level desire. Okay, most of our waking time, we are just donkeys chasing carrots and avoiding getting hit by sticks. But in this state, you're not. We are not tempted by a sensual phenomena anymore. And you enter what's called the first dhyana in Sanskrit, jhana in Pāli, and Chinese it's actually the chan ding. Okay, same chan as for the Chan school. Slightly different in the Chan school, but it comes from the same word. And of course the Japanese Zen, this term Zen. Now again, the Zen school uses it in a different way, but we're talking about here this state of concentration, samadhi. And in that first stage, we have a couple of different things happen. One of them is the experience of rapture and pleasure. Now usually rapture is described as this kind of, it's like a wash of like a blissful feeling that permeates the whole body, often described as coming from the crown of the head and flooding through the whole body, and then once it's kind of flooded, and really at first it's like a wave. It's powerful. So you're meditating, it like hits you. You can there's kind of a distinct point where that happens, and then once you're in that and it maintains itself, that's the term sukha, translated here as pleasure. So the very fact, note here that when you're using the mindfulness of the breath to be mindful of sensations, it's none of these are unpleasant, and none of these are even neutral. They are, and they're not just general types of pleasant experience. These are very specifically two slightly different types of pleasant experience that are attained in the state of dhyana and samadhi. So I think what's happening in this case, if one's using then mindfulness of the breath to undertake the four grounds of mindfulness, is it's saying, yeah, you are working on the breath, you're concentrating, you're focusing, and you're going to enter into the state of dhyana. Now, one of the reasons why I say this is kind of a slightly different take to the last take is, and again, this is a topic we've talked about earlier. I'm kind of, one eye is looking at the time, so I don't want to, me, I can just go on and on and on. So I'll try not to go on and on. To the point. For many of the contemporary traditions that use mindfulness with the vipassana, the insight meditation practice, some of them, not all of them, some of them say, look, you don't need that samadhi, you don't need that high level of concentration. You can, right? Part of this interpretation, of course, is also, at the very beginning of the text, it says, this is the only way to nirvana. And then just insight, bare insight. When you have a sensation, you just are aware you have a sensation. So that's that kind of interpretation. You don't need jhana, you don't need concentration, you just are aware of it. And so when you're meditating for a long time, yeah, you will, unless you're very flexible and very used to sitting, you will get painful feelings and unpleasant feelings. And you just are mindful of those all the same. In fact, and there are many cases, recorded cases of people having a lot of breakthroughs by focusing on pleasant experiences. So that's one take, but I think the other take of what we see in the sutras here, particularly the sutra on the mindfulness of the breath, is it's not just saying, I don't need to concentrate and I don't need jhana. Yeah, it's got jhana. You're focusing, you're using the breath as a means to enter into jhana. And then within jhana, you're having different types of experiences as well, different types of sensations, and they're primarily going to be of these pleasant varieties. This term rapture, or what one called bliss, in Chinese it's xi, same as like huanxi, like happy, but it's kind of more technical here. Sometimes translated as like bliss or even like ecstasy. Okay, let's not get into all the little nuances of the term. I like to give you a range of different terms, because I think if we get like one term to think of something, you can kind of get stuck in that. A range of different terms, you can kind of actually have to build up a more 3D picture, metaphorically, of the idea we're talking about. And then also sukha, this kind of pleasant feeling of just abiding in it. Now, one thing about this, of course, is, and it's been argued, the one that just says, look, you don't need this concentration, you're just experiencing the sensations, was then a good practice for those people that can't be full-time meditators. Because entering jhana is not easy. I'll tell you a secret. It's not really a secret. It's not easy. Yeah, it needs some serious work. Yeah, it's full-time stuff, you know. And you can see this is why in earlier teachings, the Buddha didn't really teach meditation to laity. Interesting point, actually. So just a little bit of an aside, but I think it's quite relevant. One of the Buddha's great lay disciples, called ānāpāna, or ānāpāna in Pāli, he was a very wealthy man, incredibly generous donor. His name, so ānāpāna, literally means like the guy who gave, the benefactor, the patron of those people that had no protection, literally. So like orphans, widows, the neglected, the homeless. He gave huge amounts of his money to provide them with food and shelter. Very generous, very compassionate man. And, you know, he was like the Buddha's greatest lay disciple. Now, we have in one of the sutras, when he was about to die, he knew it and his time was coming. And the Buddha asked his disciple Shariputra to go and visit ānāpāna and give him a teaching at the time of death. And what did Shariputra teach him? He taught him mindfulness. And we see in the sutra, ānāpāna himself says, like after he receives his teaching on mindfulness, so like Shariputra is basically saying, just as you're dying, just be mindful. Keep your mindful awareness. Don't be afraid. You have great merit. Don't be afraid. Just practice your mindfulness, and it will be good for you as you die. He was actually a once returner, I think, or maybe even a never return. So he wasn't going to have a bad rebirth anyway, but it was still important. And after he gave this teaching, ānāpāna, in the sutra, he says, like, wow, this is amazing. I've never heard a teaching like this before. And this was like one of the Buddha's, this is the Buddha's greatest lay disciple. So we can see from this that the Buddha did not teach these teachings to lay people. Of course, ānāpāna himself said, like, please teach this stuff to laity more. And I think that's another thing that lets us see that, you know, it was tied with meditation. And then the interpretations that kind of de-emphasize that make it more accessible. So it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm saying it's just a way to make it more accessible to other people. Okay, so let's just zip back. Oh, time's running out. Let's zip back to our text here. So in the Mindfulness of Breathing Sutra, right, you are using the breath to enter into meditation, and then the pleasant feelings. Okay, we've also got like breathing in and out, experiencing the mental formation, so just being aware of the mind, and then also tranquilizing the mind. So this calming of the mind as well. Again, I haven't looked up the Pāli term. Tranquilizing, it's probably something like samatha. We're tranquilizing or pacifying, and that's the term that's used. Shamatha goes with vipassana. Vipassana is insight. Shamatha is calm. So calm and insight, or meditation and wisdom. Samadhi, prajna, same thing. So again, this is another little reminder there that actually this practice, mindfulness of the breath, is still used to develop concentration and deep meditation. But through this practice, we're also then being mindfully aware and insightful with respect to the different experiences that we have in that meditation. So, if we can kind of keep that in mind as we're meditating, yeah, I've kind of talked a bit too long today. So let's just, enough talking, let's just do a few minutes of stretches, and then at least we can get in a sitting session for the day. How about that? I think that's probably the better idea. I think I've talked enough about how to do it, so we're going to go do some stretches. We're going to sit, we're going to be mindful of the breath, and as we're mindful of the breath, if we have those experiences, be they pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, through the body or through our other senses or even internally, we're going to be mindful of it. We're going to see there's a sensation, or we can see how it's come about, how it's ceased, its impermanence, but we're going to keep with the breath. That breath is our thread, our link that's going to keep us in that calm and focused state without us following the sensations. Okay, let's have a glass of water, and then time for a camera change. I'm going to move the camera down there, kids. Okay, and do some stretches very quickly, and then get into our sitting for the day. Okay, let's keep the stretches simple for today. On the feet, left foot, left foot, left foot, onto the hips. Remember, as we're stretching, we're already being mindful of the body, so pay attention to which body part you're stretching. Back the other way. Okay, sounds good. Hands together, stretching up. Hope you've got more ceiling space than I do. And stretching down. Stretching up. And down. One more time. And down. Okay, up. And relax. Okay, hands on your hips. On one side, other hand up, and stretching over, stretching the side of your body. Change. Other hand up, stretching over. Change. Okay, relax. Okay, the head and neck, so stretching up and down, up and down, up and down, and back to the middle, and then left and right. Okay, last set. Okay, let's I'm just gonna flip over here, see what's going on. And then I'm gonna, I need to flip back cameras, my apologies. I still think this is a better quality camera here for us all. I'll just leave that there. Take my seat. Okay. Now I think you already know how to do the sitting posture by now, so I don't need to explain that, I don't think. Make sure you're comfy. You might want to stretch a little to the sides. Right, go forward. And then over your two legs. Get you comfy on your seat faster so you don't have to kind of adjust your posture as you go. Okay, so let's maybe, as I said, because we're still using the breath as our kind of thread to keep us going, so let's maybe break our session up into two halves. First half, we're really going to just put the focus on, so relax the body, focus onto the breath, Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out, mindfully breathing in short, out short, in long, out long, etc. Calming the breath, calming the body. First half. Second half, we're going to continue with the breath, but we are going to be mindfully aware of any sensations that we experience along the way. Now, depending on how things are, if you can get really nice and concentrated, you might already be into that kind of experiencing pleasant, nice, relaxed, comfortable feeling of meditation, or maybe not. It might be a case of like it's hard, or my foot's a bit sore, my back's a bit sore. It doesn't matter. Okay, remember, non-judgmental about any of these. You just unpleasant feelings, just unpleasant feeling. Pleasant feelings, just pleasant feeling. Just leave it at that point, right? Don't run with it. Don't unpleasant and then why am I suffering? And then pleasant, aren't I a good meditator? Forget that, right? Just mindful, bare mindfulness of the sensation itself. Okay. So I hope you're comfy. Glasses off and things off, everyone. And phone on mute or whatever. I'm going to keep mine on so I keep track of the time. And I'll just give you a couple little reminders as we go. So mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in long, breathing out long. Just naturally, of course. Just be mindfully aware. Pay attention to the breath. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out, mindfully breathe in short, mindfully breathe out short, or mindfully breathe in long, mindfully breathe out long. mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out, experiencing the body. Remember, if you get distracted, it's okay, it's natural. As soon as you notice, bring your awareness back to the breath, back to the body. Continue with the breath, but we will also be mindful of the sensations that we experience. We can do the bare mindfulness. You have a sensation, be aware of sensation. If you like, you can label it as pleasant sensation, painful sensation, or neutral sensation. mindful of the breath, mindful of sensations. Mindful of sensations as just bare mindfulness, bare awareness, or you can be aware of sensations as pleasant sensations, painful sensations, or neutral sensations. See their arise and fall, and abide without attachment. Nice deep full breath in. Slowly exhale. Rock from left to right. Slowly moving from a immovable state, back to movement and activity. Stretch forward, stretching the lower back, over the left leg, the right leg. And warm up the palms. You can continue to be mindful as we do this. The sensations we might feel. It's a pleasant warm feeling over my eyes right now. My forehead, temples of face. It's quite pleasant to move my body again after sitting still for so long. I wasn't uncomfortable, but that movement can be quite pleasant. And now I feel great, to be honest. Okay, got a few minutes left. I'm just going to move forward, readjust the camera, and okay, you can do your legs if you want to. I'm fine. I've seldom, many years since I've had any numbness in my legs. And you can think of any questions or anything you want to say to wrap up the session today. Just going to pull the camera up. Okay. Okay, so if you've got any thoughts or anything you'd like to share, please feel free to drop some comments in the little comment section. What I would like to say then, okay, from Tim, this was very nice. Okay, so by very nice, you mean pleasant sensation? I assume. Okay, physical pleasant sensation, mental pleasant sensation. Okay, so for myself, yeah, okay, we're working on the breath first, and then when we moved into the sensations part, at first there was a few, okay, so just kind of like give a little recap. So there's like a tiny bit of stiffness in my lower back, which I often find that if we usually when I meditate, I first don't usually notice it, but once I start to calm down and become more mindful of the body, you know, there's tight tension, so just to try to let that relax. And then I'm getting kind of, oh, there's a little bit of that, and then more of a pleasant, just a general pleasant feeling in the body as the body's relaxing, certain points of the breath in particular. And then I had some unpleasant sensations. There was a little bit of traffic noise. It's probably not enough. I don't know if you'd hear it coming through through the mic and then through the live stream. But you know, when you're meditating, that kind of sound, it's just car and a motorbike. It's just unpleasant. And then in general, back to the body and kind of more pleasant in general, quite comfortable on the whole. Okay, see, we've got a comment here. Okay, so Tim's replied, all of the above. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Often the pleasant physical sensation and the pleasant mental sensation, there's kind of relationship between those. Okay, we've got a comment here from a participant. I'm not familiar with your name there, RKSNTS. Ayakema translated piti as clarity. What can you say about it? About the translation or about piti as a whole? So usually my understanding of piti is, yeah, it's more as mentioned, sometimes it gets translated as bliss. Bliss can kind of be maybe a bit strong, or like ecstasy. Ecstasy, however, has a sense of, literally it means standing outside yourself, which I don't think it is, but it's this. Another text, you see the description is, it comes as like a kind of a waves of this very pleasant feeling coming through the whole body. It's it's kind of felt by through the body. What I mean is you feel it everywhere, but in another sense, because it's not coming about because the body has got some physical object. It's not like because you're getting a nice massage, for example, or you're sitting in a spa pool. It's coming internally by the concentration of the mind, and the concentration of the mind is leading to a relaxation of the body and the mind. But as clarity, I don't see it as that myself, and I don't see it as that in the context of other texts. But I would say it will come with clarity. When the mind becomes clear, which means the mind's becoming more concentrated, you will get that state of piti. So they're not unrelated, but I don't think piti itself is clarity, at least in this context. But I don't know of which context that Venerable Ayya Khema is referring to. So, just to say, we need to make sure we're comparing the understanding of the term in a similar context. Okay. Otherwise, how is everyone else doing? Everyone else doing okay, I hope. I hope you can also see from the last comments that I was saying that then mindfulness of sensations isn't just a case of, oh, I just sit there and then, oh, painful or unpleasant. I have seen, that is one way of doing it, and I've seen a lot of places that do it like that. But then it just seems to me you've got this bare kind of mindfulness and insight based on that, but insight was always paired with that calm. That wisdom is always paired with concentration. Prajna samadhi. And the clearer the samadhi, the greater that concentration and focus and clarity, then that sharper that insight should be. So I think they should really kind of come together. Okay, we've got a comment here from Hanuman. I was unable to join last week and tried to watch the recording instead. About halfway the video ended. Is there, oh, really? Okay, there are, I've been uploading these also, because now when I do the live stream, when I hit the stream button, it automatically records, and then I'm uploading those records to my YouTube page. So what I'll do for you, Hanuman, and anyone else, I think I've already uploaded last week's one to YouTube. So I'll go back to last week's page here on Facebook, and I'll put in the link for the YouTube session. How about that? I should do that with all of them, to be honest. My apologies. And then you should be able to watch the whole thing. How about that? And I'll do it for the other ones as well. Okay. Yeah, thanks for reminding me, and hopefully you can get the whole class. Okay, and then another comment by RK. A pleasant sensation that is not exhilarating, right? Not sensual feeling. Okay, my name is Eric Santos. Okay, so RKSNTS. Okay, gotcha. A pleasant... Maybe actually your term then exhilarating is probably similar. It can have that, a bit of an exhilarating the feeling, and sometimes it's even described as like, makes the hair on your body stand on end. Some descriptions give it like that. And that way it can actually be, in some ways, quite overwhelming. And when people get it the first time, so it might be very concentrated, meditating hard, and then they have this feeling and they can be like, oh, wow, that was like so exciting. And because they go, wow, that was so exciting, of course, then their concentration and their focus is lost, and then they bounce out of it. So it takes some experience to be able to have that experience of that piti, and take it with equanimity. It's like, okay, this is just piti. It's just a pleasant feeling. There's nothing to get excited about. And when you respond to it in that way, you can maintain it, and maintain the piti with the sukha, and maintain then in that concentrated stuff. But yeah, it's not sensual. It's not coming about because you have seen something or heard or smelt or tasted or touched or or thought of something. It's kind of not come about from that. It's the pleasant feeling that comes about when the mind is freed from desire and freed from those hindrances. It's freed from desire, aversion, dullness, restless, agitation, and doubt, right? So that's the classic kind of description. the first dhyana, which has both this piti, this exhilarating, blissful, washing over you feeling, and then this more stable, pleasant feeling that you maintain in, along with applied thought. So your mind is applied to the object, your focus is applied and sustained there, and you're doing all this while you've already abandoned temporarily the sensual desires and aversions, and also you've got rid of this like dullness and agitation of the mind as well. That's kind of classic description of the first dhyana. So part of that description of the first dhyana, and also subsequent dhyanas as well, includes this sensation aspect. First of these two, and then later on it abides in just the sukha itself. The fourth dhyana is said, however, to not even have this pleasant sensation, but it's actually a neutral sensation. But it's got the peak level of clarity and equanimity. Now, I can't say that from experience, but that's kind of the description of it. So then you're going through the jhanas, and you're using the sensations within the jhanas as your basis for the mindfulness of sensation. Okay, I hope that helps to clarify. We've gone a couple of minutes over, but thanks for your questions. It's always good to have some questions, and hopefully my answers can help clarify for you. Thanks everyone for tuning in this week. I'll be uploading this within a day or two, and then I'll put the link for this one and past classes also in the respective Facebook pages. So in the meantime, wherever you are, take care, stay safe, particularly if you are in places where COVID-19 is still pretty strong. If you're under lockdown or you're under general guidance to stay indoors, just be safe. It's easy to get used to kind of these things and then get a bit slack. We can't be slack. We've got to be vigilant, you know, not just for ourselves, for our friends, our families, our loved ones, in particular those who are vulnerable. So we think of the elderly as vulnerable. I think it's more than just the elderly as well. You know, this idea that kids are fine, they won't get it. I'm not so sure, because, you know, it's not something that you get and you get rid of. It can lead lasting damage, and for like a young person or a child or an infant to have it and have like possibly permanent damage to lungs or other parts of the body, it's not good. So we've got to be vigilant. We've got to keep on working on this until we can put an end to it. Okay, so thanks everyone. Okay, nice to see you there, Terry. Yes, I can see. Got a good connection with the Philippines, and you know, glad to see you all joining in. I hope it's of value to you. And back at you there, Tim. Stay safe, stay happy, keep meditating, and we'll see you back for next week for class number 5. Okay, see you all. I'm hitting the button, and then might be a delay at the end.